I can see that we have a young group, so hopefully you guys can read that okay. Those slides are a little bit small. And I just want to blow quicker, so I'll be pushing.
Was that sarcasm?
Anyways, it's...
Was that sarcasm, Derek?
No. I'm not going to make fun of you, Dave, but I won't make fun of my dad. Don't know what that's all about, but I might learn someday. Yeah, it's an honor for me to be here. Some of you were joking that you remember when I was a little bit smaller. Rotary is, Point Loma Rotary has really been a part of my life. It's something since I was a kid I was always very aware of through my dad and appreciated everything you guys do. And the events, I enjoyed the comedy nights. I enjoyed meeting the Cardinal at the event. It's always fun. So anyways, it's an honor being here to talk. So we are going to talk about me. Who here has worked with a personal trainer? Okay, good. I'm seeing more hands now. People are interested in getting some advice on that. Personal training it's now an industry. It's changed an awful lot. Maybe 20 years ago it was something for athletes and for Hollywood stars, and now people are realizing it's important for them to have some type of assistance because they're busy to think about, too busy often to figure this stuff out. But as an industry, we've changed. Speak up a little bit. Okay. And I'm not going to use the mic unless I have to because I'm moving around a little bit. There are different areas of the industry now. So there's some that are working in sports performance. I work specifically with, although I have clients who come to me for traditional goals, most of my clients will have goals like they want to lose weight, they want to feel better, they want to get in shape. I deal specifically with resistance training and corrective exercise. So using that as a tool to help people move better, get to their personal goal, and often get out of pain if that's an issue with them in the way that they're moving. So a little bit about what we do. Activated, strong, and flexible. So restoring through corrective exercise. We're going to, I've got 30 minutes, right? We're going to hopefully we'll look at strength training today. Anybody here lift weights? Okay. And 20, 30 years ago when we thought of weight training, it came out of bodybuilding originally, and then let's say in the 80s and 90s it became a little bit more popular for the average subject. And then most people realize the benefit now. They know that it's good for bone mass and good on building their body, but people still look at it as maybe something that'd be an extra thing to do. We'll talk about a different way to look at it. We're going to talk about the primal movement patterns of the human body, what can alter those patterns, and how to restore those patterns and what those really mean. So whenever I talk, I know we've got to keep this going, but if you guys have questions, please stop me as we go. My goal is always that you can leave with one thing. So if that's answering one of your questions, or at least at the end, I want to make sure to do that. So are you exercising the whole? I don't know if you can see that. I pay you 5 pebbles a session to be my personal trainer, but all we ever do is swim. And that's, I have someone who swims every day, I think that's awesome. If somebody walks every day, that's awesome. I mean, I give somebody credit for that, but I want them to start thinking about, their entire body. We do more than just swim. We rotate, we push, we pull. We'll be talking about that. So having more of a holistic approach to it. Strength training 2.0. So thinking about tuning up your body before you test drive. Kind of an updated view. So why do some people strength train? What are they trying to achieve when they do that?
Tone.
Okay, tone's a very popular one, and it will cause actually a increased tonicity to the muscle. It will feel firmer, and that's what a lot of people want to do. Absolutely, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. They'll think of that's aerobics and that's cardiovascular, but you absolutely have a cardiovascular effect with strength training. So great.
Stronger bones.
Exactly, stronger bones. So having a stimulus on the bone mass, we've shown that you have to not just walking, but there has to be enough of a stress, or what I like to call a dose on the bones to cause a change. I want people to look at also the way I define strength training compared to other exercise. It's a very specific movement that with a specific dose that can elicit a change in both the bones as well as a muscle. Your muscles, as we age, as we all know, start to become less active. It's not just flexibility. So even a little bit can go a long way. So think of it in terms of muscle activity. It's a neurological thing. You may not get the same effect. So if you look at aerobics versus anaerobic, aerobics would be doing the same repetitive motion over and over. So going for a walk, doing that same swim over a certain period of time. If you haven't swam before, you might feel sore the next day. If you haven't walked up a hill in a while or gone hiking, you might feel sore. But real quick, because that's overall aerobic activity, the body will adapt to that, and that's not going to cause a specific change. Anybody here play sports still? What sports? I'm just curious. Tennis, great. So, and I love that. I love hearing that. We all should still be having fun too. It's not just going to the gym. The thing about sports, and I have a lot of clients when I have them fill out kind of an entry for a new client, and they'll list it as exercise as their recreation in their sports. And you should. Working in the yard is exercise. But a big difference is that's moving. If I'm a racquetball player and I'm running to hit the ball, all I'm thinking about is hitting that ball and hopefully making the shot. I'm not thinking about whether I am training my left pectoral versus my right, rectus femoral, all these different things. That's what strength training, and that's where it's different, is that you can have an isolated change in the body. So people who are active and people who do play sports and people who want to continue to do things that they like in life, go on vacations and have fun and move, you have to think of exercise as both the real specific and concentrated exercise where you know exactly what you're trying to focus on. Anybody here do Pilates? Okay, good. And that's what Pilates does. That's just, in a sense, a brand, but it really is resistance training. Yoga can do that to a point. So it's not just weight training, but they're all specific to certain movement patterns in the body versus just going out for your morning walk. And I mention this right now in terms of strength training because I meet so many people that are active, that have always been active, but their bodies are changing. And when they're younger, that worked. As we get older, it's not causing enough of a dose or a stimulus to make that change. Tricking the primal brain. Anybody read a book called Younger Next Year? You gotta check it out. It's a really good book. When I first saw it out in the app, I was at a bookstore. I thought it was just another kind of gimmicky New Year's resolution time book that came out. A client gave it to me and I read it, and it does a really good job in getting people to understand. And it's fun, it's really humorous. It's basically a doctor talking to his patient throughout the whole book, and it's a true story. And his patient was heading towards retirement, had done well in his career, financially was pretty well set, but had realized that his body was kind of a disaster. And so it goes through different chapters on what he needs to do to change. But one thing, that's none of you guys, right? One thing
Miss Denise.
that they talk about is the primal brain, which I think is really a neat way to look at it and the way they approach it. Now, if anybody understands brain physiology, we've got our cerebral brain, that's where we think and our thought, and that's what makes us smarter than our dog, hopefully. And then we've got our brain that is part of our brain, that's the exact same thing our dog has that a lizard has, and that's the limbic system and the endocrine system. Most research has shown that's the part of our brain that controls two words, growth or decay. And when we talk about growth, we don't mean growth as in building muscles. It's a stimulus that tells all the cells in your body to keep recreating, keep reproducing, in a sense, stay young. When we are not stimulating those through that primal brain, it's a state of decay. And aging, as we know, does happen, but we have a lot more control than we realize. The point I want to make about it is that think of that system as being blind, and it is. It doesn't have an association to our eyes. It just can feel, it's a fight or flight system. So if somebody does, let's say somebody decides to start becoming more active, and well, I won't have them run sprints upstairs right away, but if they're doing that, that part of the brain doesn't know whether they are running from a saber-toothed tiger or if they're just running stairs. So that blind part of our brain, that's where it gets that stimulus, starts to produce growth hormone, glucagon, testosterone, estrogen, all these things.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but
Yeah, no,
at
please
this
do.
point, I'm wondering about the fact that Dick is going to be doing his strength training for the bike ride. And so
Yeah.
Give us some ideas about things we could be doing to kind of strengthen our bodies.
We're going to get to that. I do have a little jam. I'll have a special program for
Good.
for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I did just know, and that's, go ahead.
So regarding the primal brain that you're talking about, I've heard some things about that, but doesn't any kind of sport or athleticism lead to stimulation of the primal?
That's a great point. I want to make that point. Thank you. Is the first time you do something, if there's a challenge, enough of an effort to it, you stimulate it. Once the body becomes accustomed to what that is, playing tennis, for instance, going for your morning walk, doesn't stimulate it anymore. That's part of it. You can do that through strength training, and there's other things you can do that you can control the dose over time and you can progress it. You can find ways to do that. Let's say you play racquetball. If you really that's pretty intense to a point, but if you're playing that same game with that same partner, it's pretty much the same to the body. So again, that blind part of our brain doesn't know, but it's got to be stressful, but it's a healthy, safe stress, and there's ways to do that. But it's just getting you guys to think about that. At the very least, I recommend checking that book out. So we'll get moving here.
Who's the author?
Geez. Okay, no, they're the characters in the book the whole time. I'll write down the name of the book for you at the end.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, next year.
3 days a week, and this is not just strength training, but it's got to be something stressful enough. And again, it's not the duration, it's the stimulus that matters. But they're doing a lot of really cool research on this kind of stress adaptation, and that's at all ages that they're doing that. So I'm going to move past this slide. It tells people just getting to think of their body like a vehicle. Anybody have a sports car, have a car that they enjoy or like sports cars? A lot of people might not have driven that car for a while. If you haven't, what are we going to do? We're going to make sure that we see how it's going. We're going to test it. I'm not a big car person, but I know I make sure it has gas first. Make sure the oils you may need to be changed, the alignment. So you've got to look at your body the same way. So before you start an exercise program, you have to think of your body the same way. So that's what more of the specific training. You want to test it through seeing how your body moves. Now you guys might recognize some of the stuff through exercise, but a gentleman by the name of Paul Check. Oh, no, yeah.
You didn't recognize anything.
Exactly.
I think it's on top left.
I saw you stand up. I saw you stand up, so that is squatting. Okay.
I don't push away, Paul.
Yeah. There's different ways to look at that. A gentleman by the name of Paul Check, he broke this down. He actually studied everything from young kids to athletes to just every one of us. And they broke down the human body into only 6 movement patterns. So that would be pushing, and it doesn't matter how we do that. This is what we have to be proficient at to not have any issues, and we're going to be talking about joint issues. So pushing, whether I'm on the ground and I'm lifting myself up, or I'm pushing something away. Pulling, whether I'm doing a pull up, if any of us can still do that, or pulling something towards us. We've got squatting, which would be, again, you sit down, you stand up. Squatting versus, which we'll see a lunge up here, is your feet are basically parallel. So the point is you guys do this. It's just how well you do it. Okay, a lunge, if I were to drop something onto the ground and not think about it, I'd go to reach. This would be a lunge. And this is one of the ones where I see a lot of people, a lot of people will not just even do that anymore. But if they do, that's where they'll start to feel, ow, that hurts my knee when I do that. So there's something that's broken down in that primal pattern that needs to be addressed, and it absolutely can be. Bending is a little bit different. You can see in the top corner. So these are all kind of fitness versions of it where you can train it, practice it. If you guys had to get something out in the back of your car, you can't bend your knees. And that's where a lot of people hurt their back, is where they're forced to bend forward to reach something. So obviously, you have to have the strength for that. Twisting is probably the one that I see in almost all sports. So anybody play golf here? Okay, so that's got a lot of rotation to that motion. So you've got to be good at that. But definitely most things in life require some degree of twisting. And then gait, walk, jogging, running, obviously is important. And you know, and I'm not going to ask, if you guys go for a long walk and how you might feel sometimes after or the next day, if there is any pain with that, assuming you haven't had an acute injury, something has broken down in that pattern. And again, it needs to be addressed and can be addressed. So what causes joint dysfunction? Muscle imbalances. Anybody heard of muscle imbalances before? Okay, and basically what that is, it's a simple way of saying every joint in your body, okay, has a balance really with more than one other muscle. But if we do an obvious one, so if we think of sitting down, I'll go over this in a second, but my hip, so you guys have muscles in the front of your thigh, which hopefully you're familiar with. You may not know the names, but you know you got muscles there. You've got muscles in the back of my thigh, which are your glutes, and they have a harmony, and they're supposed to be working together. At some point, they can start to have a change in their relationship. One becomes stronger, or I shouldn't say stronger, tighter, and one becomes longer and weaker. And that's where the joints start to change. And there is an ideal posture and mechanics of every joint in our body. And if you get an imbalance, and people may not notice it, and that's the thing where we will say, and we know there's changes with age, but it's more of a chronological thing. If you had an imbalance 20 years ago, you didn't notice it. You may not notice it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You're starting to notice, why is my hip killing me? You know, and it's the time of that imbalance and therefore the effect on the posture of that hip joint that has changed. So asymmetries are completely related. So again, if I've got a tight hip flexor and a weak glute, that is actually going to cause my leg to be slightly forward. And this could be teeny small degrees, but it's enough. I'm now going to have an asymmetry between the left leg. Same thing. If you want to go on that long hike, you want to go on that active trip, and you wonder why you're hurting when you're not prepared for it, it's going to be coming from that torque in the body. Ultimately, it affects the posture. And when we think of posture, we think of the way we sit. We think of just our spine. The spine is one of the big ones, but every single joint, even your pinky finger and the joints within it, have an ideal static and dynamic posture. And they can be affected by the muscles that work on it. So, how did we get here? I like that picture. I'm not going to get into debate of evolution or creation. Let's just say it started in the middle. But it is, you guys can see that. That's kind of what's happened. And that really, I don't have to read off the things. I can say, hey, this is it. We all know we're not doing what our ancestors did. And by the way, did our ancestors have to go to the gym and hear talks like this and think about it? No. They just lived and they worked. They were more worried about running from that saber-toothed tiger. You know, so fixed positions are the biggest one. And when I'm talking about how we start to have, I'm talking about the pain and the dysfunction that comes from this. So if you have an acute injury, okay, you blow out an ACL, you have a fall, that's a totally different, I don't care how much corrective exercise you do or stretches or so on, you can help them. We're talking about the little, quiet, insidious things that are lying there that you don't know about until 10, 15 years later, and you can do it at any age to make changes. Repetitive motions, a baseball pitcher, if you were to actually analyze their posture, and let's say it was one of the pitchers that actually is in really good shape, which we don't always see, you would say, oh, he's active, he's fit, he's an athlete. You would see that their posture is side bent right, rotated if they're a right-handed pitcher. It has changed. Even the bones themselves have started to change. They've grown in different positions because of that repetitive stress. So, is being a pitcher a good thing? Well, if he makes millions of dollars, it probably is. But is it good on his body? Probably not. So those repetitive motions can also do that. It's not just the fixed positions. Lack of balance, past trauma. So if you have an injury, if you guys have had a back injury, a major one, an acute injury, an accident, there's going to be a response to other joints in the body, right? Compensations, if you broke your ankle or twisted your ankle, you did that once, it's not going to be just that ankle. There's something that's going to affect other parts of your body. So
that's a really interesting point you're making. The one question I have would be around whether certain types of therapists can correct joint imbalance or muscle imbalance that can lead, for example, from your hip, all of a sudden you have a problem in your toe. And how do you are chiropractors better people to work with you, or are there specific people that you make it?
Well, they're all good, and that's to a point. Depends who it is you're talking about. But all these therapies, physical therapy, chiropractors. What I do is corrective exercise. I know some Pilates people that ultimately what they're doing, and I'll talk about this in a second here at the end, is it's flexibility. It's increasing flexibility, and it's increasing strength and activation of the muscle that hasn't been working. But I found that it depends on how good the person is at assessing. That's what it comes down to. Teaching the stretches and the exercises, anybody can do it, you know, I mean, to a point. It's finding out what does that person really need, where is the muscle imbalance. So, and to your point, what I'm trying to get at, hopefully I am, is that if you've got a knee problem, okay, the knee, I like to call the knee a dumb joint. I don't mean that in a bad way. It doesn't really do much, it's just a hinge joint, and it's highly affected by your hip and your ankle. If your knee has not been blown out by some major injury, acute injury, but you're now having knee pain, it's almost always going to be coming from somewhere else. The knee is a result of that. So if you're evaluating and assessing that person, you're going to first look at how mobile are their hips. If your hips aren't mobile, that dumb knee that's just a hinge joint is now going to have to become more mobile. So a lot of meniscus wear down that we're seeing, and that's the knee replacements, which, by the way, you still need to do stuff even if you're headed towards replacement or have had it, has come from an alignment change in the femur versus the lower leg. And that came from the hip. So we got joints that are designed to be real mobile and strong, and we have other joints that are just designed to move in one plane of motion. So that's what it's. I always tell people that pain and where you're having an issue is almost always secondary to weakness and flexibility elsewhere in your body, and that's what those professions evaluate.
Okay, and how do we determine whether we're talking about arthritis as opposed to a therapeutic problem?
Absolutely, and arthritis is one of the first questions I ask. You can't change that, you can help that once that's started. Arthritis can come on because of an alignment issue. But you just get that information, and you could definitely help that though. Because if you have any, I didn't see that Bird was interested in this talk. So,
I have a quick question.
yeah,
Is the computer bad? I use this handle.
yeah.
So that'd be like a picture.
Yeah, that's a repetitive motion. That's one of the most common ones we're finding with our clients. So we have tried to get some people to move to the left side. The point of this is we're going to use our computers. I have to. I've seen the effect on my body. We're going to use our iPads. We're going to use our phones. You need to have a plan of action. If you're going to do that, it's going to change all these muscles in the front. They are going to be tight. I don't care. We all start, right? When we sit at our computer, hopefully, we start pretty good. As we mentally get into reading our emails or going to our project, if you're to watch somebody, they slowly drift forward and that head slowly starts to come forward. So all these muscles in the front of your body have now become short. All the muscles in the back of your body, that's one giant imbalance, have become weak. So you have two things you can do. One, look at your work situation. I've had a lot of people that just have been using a laptop and not putting a rise on it. So you have to do that and get a keyboard. If you're using a laptop like this right here, you are going to have some problems. You're going to feel some problems in your neck.
I just do the editing part.
What's that?
I use mostly the numeric part. So
Yeah.
it's really, I don't use this that much.
Yeah, but you want to, I mean, just know you have to do it. And that's the point. And so you need to have some things that you can do to counteract it. So there's some stuff you can correct in your work environment, but we know there's a ton of stuff we can't. You know, and there's a whole industry now in ergonomics. And it's really good, but I've found that you've got to have both. You've got to also know that, okay, if we're going to use these great time-saving devices, we're supposed to be saving some time. So let's use 10 minutes of our time to actually do some stretches as soon as I get up from that computer. That's the answer, honestly. It doesn't take that much, but most of us don't do that. So we're sitting, we get up, especially if it's been a long plane flight, we know that, and we're kind of now stuck in this position. Instinctively, I think a lot of people do stretch. It's just knowing what to do. So, but a lot of it is the devices that we're using. Excess body fat, just the reality. When it comes forward, it pulls on that pelvis. That's one of the most common ones we find. So actually losing a little bit of weight will affect the posture of that pelvis. And the big one now that everyone's talking about, you hear all these gluten-free diets and so on. There's some truth to that. They're really studying inflammation in the digestive tract. Inflammation now, not just in digestive issues and health issues, has a major effect on the lumbar spine and the position of the pelvis. So it can lead to musculoskeletal issues when it's a dietary thing. So that's a whole nother subject. So restoring with corrective exercise, these are the three main therapies. And whether I'm talking, like she was mentioning about chiropractors versus physical therapists, this is what we're using. It's static stretching is, so we've all stretched before, right, in our life. So what we're basically doing is if I'm turning, and I know I've learned that these muscles in the front have gotten tight when I work on my computer. I need to stretch them out after. So I'm elongating the muscle. I want to hold that for 30 to 60 seconds. I like stretching. I would say it's probably the least effective out there of the different therapies, but you can use it anywhere. So I think it's good overall. One point on stretching, you want to make sure if you have a watch, look, they've shown it has to be held for 30 seconds to even create a length change in the muscle. The muscle's been tight, especially it's been tight for years, and you stretch it immediately. What do you think it wants to do? It actually shortens. And they show that stretching under 10 seconds, except there's some very specific therapies out there, but can actually make a muscle shorter. So make sure it is being held, and you can almost feel it start to stretch when you do it correctly. Self-massage. So does anybody use some of these tools like rollers and great and foam roller we have over there?
It's not a muscle.
The thing I love about them now, it's kind of become a whole industry. If you go to the Healthy Back store, they really do work. I mean, you can go to Sharper Image, and they got a million new things I haven't caught up with. But having a massage therapist every day would be awesome. But we know it's just not going to happen. So that's what they've done, is finding ways to roll out and understand that your muscles, again, your entire skeleton is controlled by these muscles. And again, your skeleton is basically joints and relating joints. So, and it all relates. If you have those tight spots, the muscle cells, there's thousands of them. So if I go back to that example of sitting down, I now have thousands of quadriceps and rectus femoris and iliacus and all these muscles that have shortened. So I could sit there and try to stretch them, but if they've started to develop knots and what is really microscopic adhesions, it won't stretch. You have to actually physically get in there. And I find people instinctively start doing that. They'll actually on their neck, if they're tight, they'll do that. So holding the tender spot is more effective. So if you guys ever do have a knot, just put pressure into it for about 30 to 45 seconds. And that actually is a neurological phenomenon. It sends a signal to the spindles at the end of the muscles to tell that muscle to actually relax. It's okay. So we're not in trauma anymore. That's what it is. It's basically a short phase scar tissue that develops. You can't break up that tissue, that scar tissue, with regular stretching. So a lot of really cool devices out there. Any of the massage tools, even the things you put and drape over a chair. You ever seen those little massagers? They're awesome. So I tell people, you learn something, that doing the self-massage 5 minutes a day, it should be the same thing as brushing your teeth. It's funny, there's certain habits we've learned through the dental profession, did a good job of saying you have to brush your teeth, you have to floss your teeth. But our muscular system, we don't think of taking care of it. But it's a huge system in the body, so it's something that should be added, especially as we're starting to use these computers more and change the position of the body. The one that I feel is the most ignored, and really what I always like to talk about to people, is the strengthening side. And again, that's kind of my specialty. I teach people flexibility too. But when you have a muscle that's become tight, and if you've ever worked with a therapist who focuses on just flexibility, and you find that it hasn't gotten better, it's almost always going to be related to the opposite muscle. So, what?
I noticed that you don't have dynamic stretching or dynamic warm-up on your list. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, these are real isolated correctives, so it'd be for a specific area, but once somebody addressed those specific areas, so if somebody had a tight hip flexor, or they had a shoulder that wasn't working correctly, you'd want it. Dynamics is where it's more of the primal movements. You'd have somebody, once they're loosening their hip flexor, I'd have them slowly start to do some motion to actually get ready for whatever event that they're doing. It might be a gym workout, it might be going to play tennis. So, but dynamics are great. But I think of it more like stretching exercise than a specific stretch. But strengthening.
I was just going to say, the last one on there, strengthening and activating, like if you want to strengthen your specific bones or whatever, how often should you, I mean, is this like twice a week or what?
And what we're talking about here is the muscular side of things, but bones is another benefit of strength training. If somebody has, and almost everybody now, including myself, we have weak extensors in our thoracic spine. It's all because of computers, unless you've never used a computer. But from sitting in computers, these muscles have gotten weak. So I have to find a way to open up and strengthen that. Every day for about 30 seconds, literally hold that position. And that'd be strengthening enough. Now, is it gonna make me stronger than I ever was? Is it gonna build the bone mass in my thoracic spine? Probably not. Then I wanna load that area, maybe with some dumbbells,